Hello everybody, this is Dan Fisher for Conatus Views. I'm here today with Meghan Murphy from Feminist Current. Very glad to have you on the show, Meghan.
Thanks for having me on.
That's my pleasure. You won't be able to see me on the recording, unfortunately. We're having to do this a little bit differently to usual. So obviously we've got this JY character, if you like. I'm not sure whether we'd be taken down if we mention his name. Then we've got sort of the left in general, your recent article, Twitter wants me to be silent and the right wants me to join. Obviously you have been in the sort of the media business for quite a while. You started up a radio show, I think, in 2012. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I've been doing radio stuff since maybe 2010, and I launched Feminist Current, my website, in 2012 alongside the Feminist Current podcast.
Sure. Did you go into this business as a radical feminist straight off? What was your journey on this?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really go into any business with any kind of intention. I just started doing feminist radio, at the co-op radio station here in Vancouver. So that's unpaid, obviously. Prior to that, I was doing a little radio show on a pirate radio station on a little tiny Gulf island, and that was out of a trailer in the middle of a sheep field.
Huh.
So that didn't pay either. So I started off doing radio and then started blogging about feminism, again, all unpaid. I was at that point, I completed my BA in women's studies and had started grad school. So I was working on a master's degree in gender, sexuality, and women's studies, and kind of started writing more about feminism while I was completing that degree, and wanted to try to start getting published in other places, places with more bigger audiences, etc. And yeah, eventually was able to publish in Ms. Magazine and Horizons, which is a Canadian feminist magazine. And from there, things just kind of grew and grew. I went to journalism school. Actually, I'm a journalism school dropout. I went to journalism school partly because my supervisor at grad school was encouraging me to, and the head of the journalism program also really wanted me to come. But as I was in journalism school, I kind of just ran out of time and money, to be honest. But I was working at that point, and my goal in terms of going to journalism school was just to try to figure out, how to get published, because it's quite hard, if you're not already published and you don't have bylines and you're not known, it's hard to get published. So there's this big middle ground that seemed like a mystery. But I did learn some valuable stuff in journalism school. I did an internship and was too busy working and couldn't afford to go to school and do like unpaid internships and stuff like that anymore. So I dropped out, and I've just been working ever since. And I've been really busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, your site is absolutely fantastic. I know that me personally, me and my friends, I don't remember when we started reading Feminist Current, but it seems like a lifetime ago. Did you feel like there wasn't any site similar to what you wanted to do? Is that sort of the reason that you started up Feminist Current?
Yeah, I mean, there was nowhere to put stuff like this. Like the stuff I wanted to write about, I felt like there was nowhere to publish that kind of thing. I mean, in mainstream media, liberal media, even, left media, there wasn't really anywhere for a radical feminist analysis. There's so few places that you could write critically about things like prostitution and pornography, and objectification. And these were things I wanted to write about, as well as, issues surrounding male violence against women. That's mostly been my focus over the years at Feminist Current. And, as you probably know, mainstream media and liberal media prefers a more, pop version of feminism.
Yeah.
Third wave feminism, liberal feminism, whatever you want to call it. which is a pretty surface analysis that doesn't have a critique of capitalism, for example, at all, and treats women's oppression as an individual thing that can be overcome through personal choices.
Absolutely, yeah. And I ask you this partly out of curiosity, of course, but partly because this is one of the things that really pushed us to found Conatus News as well. It's that feeling of there not existing a platform that we wanted. This is something that I've noticed, and it's been sort of a disappointment to us as well. Most of the reaction to postmodernism, as we see it, is sort of coming from I suppose, a non-feminist perspective. And so what we wanted to do with Conatus News is to really start off with that pro-feminist, egalitarian, pro-everyone really approach. So, I mean, I feel like I really I understand where you're coming from with that. I wonder whether it's worse in Canada, because we've had things like Julie Bindel getting published in The Guardian. She's done quite well there. And, I are constantly hearing from a lot of people how much they hate The Guardian. And yet we manage to get things published in there occasionally. So do you feel like the situation is that bad in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in Canada that's comparable to The Guardian. Canadian media will not publish radical feminist perspectives. I mean, most of the places that I publish at and have published at over the years are in the UK or in the States. There's a few publications that I've managed to publish a few things in here in Canada. Like I've published op-eds at the CBC a little bit, National Post, The Walrus when John Kay was editing there. The National Observer, but for the most part, I mean, it's difficult also because the Canadian media landscape is quite small in comparison with the UK or the US. So there's just not that many places to publish in general. But the media here in Canada has not shown any interest in a radical feminist perspective, especially in terms of gender. So this is the controversial issue right now, as I'm sure you've noticed. This issue of gender identity, ideology, and legislation. And so the Canadian media has, refused to acknowledge that there's a feminist critique and a feminist analysis of gender identity and gender identity legislation. And so while they have covered the issue, they've covered it in this way that is either completely uncritical or that positions the debate as left versus right. So pretending that every single person on the left, every single feminist is in favor of gender identity legislation and supportive of gender identity ideology and trans activism. And it's only, these like right-wing religious fundamentalists, loony bins who, and this is how they're being represented. I'm not saying everyone on the right is a loony bin. Yeah. I'm just saying this is how much of our mainstream liberal media presents the issue. Those are the only people who are, against trans people. They're so disingenuous about what the analysis is and what the public's concerns are in general.
Yeah.
Because the public in general has good and legitimate concerns about this ideology and legislation. And certainly they just, ignore the feminist analysis entirely.
Yeah, and this is something that I've definitely seen. So many of the feminists, the gender-neutral feminists that I've interacted with, they've all been left-wing, left-leaning, although a growing number are beginning to call themselves politically homeless. I did a little totally unscientific poll on our Twitter feed, and it was something like it was only 100 people responded, but 50% called themselves politically homeless, and then like 30% left, and 20% right, or some percent centre, I don't remember. And this is really interesting because clearly there is a holistic, if you like, analysis of oppression that encompasses, capitalism, sex, race, and so on. And yet, it doesn't really seem to exist in an organised form. Everywhere the left is dominated by these kind of postmodernist approaches with their sort of queer theory type ideas. I've written quite a lot on this topic. So I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, when did you sort of realise that there was a deep problem with the left, that the left wasn't getting it?
As soon as I started writing about feminism. So, I was writing about prostitution pretty early on. And as soon as I started writing about prostitution, it was clear to me that the left was failing in terms of incorporating a feminist analysis into their analysis of, their non-analysis of women's oppression. Yeah. But the left presents itself as feminist. The left presents itself as interested in, liberation for all and justice for all and equality for all. Yet when it came to women's issues like prostitution and pornography, suddenly they were taking these like pro-capitalist positions and supporting a free market approach to the sex trade. And, kind of denying the inherent exploitation of the sex industry and trying to argue that it was a woman's personal choice and that women have agency and that prostitution and pornography could be potentially empowering for women, and failing to look at the systems of power and the reasons that women end up in prostitution and pornography and what really happens to them there. I mean, certainly some women choose pornography and prostitution, and some women may even enjoy it, but for the most part that's not the case. And if you talk to any woman, I mean, I've talked to so many women around the world who've been in prostitution, and the experience of women in prostitution by and large is not a positive one. And for the most part they've ended up there, I mean, first of all when they were kids or teenagers, and they've ended up there because they had no other choice, because they were funneled into it, because they have a history of abuse and sexual assault, because they were coerced. Really, I mean, you have to be pretty clueless not to know what prostitution is really like. And if you don't know, I mean, look into it and listen to what women who've left prostitution are saying. I think you have to be in denial to think that most women in the world want to have sex with strange men day in and day out. I mean, men who don't care about them, men who don't know them, men who don't care about their well-being or their feelings, their safety, care about respecting them, etc. And yeah, so, and the left was just sort of refusing to talk about this or acknowledge it. And as soon as I started writing critically about prostitution, I was attacked by so-called leftists.
Right. Yeah. And there's a number of interesting issues around that. Certainly, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Jane Claire Jones. I've been very impressed with her work, and hopefully we should have an article coming up by her soon. And what she shows is actually the academic feminism, sort of derived from queer theory, is virtually identical to anti-feminism in terms of the arguments that they put forward. I mean, there are a number of sort of reasons why this could be. But what's your theory as to how this sort of version of feminism, which is really anti-feminism, managed to make itself into the sort of the dominant form of feminism in our society?
I think that you're right, that academic feminism, I mean, as far as feminism in academia goes, it's pretty much all queer theory, and rooted in postmodernism. So it doesn't seem to be rooted in what women are doing on the ground, the grassroots independent global women's movement. It has erased and rejected second wave radical feminist analysis almost entirely. Um, and so it just becomes all theory, and it becomes totally detached from real life. There's nothing wrong with theory. I mean, theory is behind all activism and political ideology. And you know, like I said, I did my degrees in women's studies, women, gender, and sexuality studies. They changed the name of the department while I was plugging along over there from women's studies to add gender studies and sexuality studies. But at least they didn't get rid of the word woman entirely, as most departments have done now.
Yeah, and where they're not, they're replacing it with an unpronounceable word with an X in the middle, which I'm not even going to try to say. The whole point is that you can't pronounce it. You can't even say woman.
Yeah, I don't know what the word even means, and certainly I don't know how to say it, woman with an X.
No.
But I guess apparently it's more inclusive. That's what we're told.
Oh, dear.
God forbid everyone in the world not be allowed to be a woman.
Yeah. And this is sort of fascinating for me because obviously this is not a criticism in any way of the sort of the civil rights movements and so on. But it's sort of ironic that the word discrimination has become so interlinked with the concept of racial discrimination that it's taken on an entirely negative meaning, when discrimination merely means to tell the difference between things, and actually being able to tell the difference between things is really important. Boundaries are really important, and this is a big problem with queer theory, in that it sees boundaries as obstacles. Now, what kind of person sees all boundaries as obstacles, or someone who doesn't want anything getting in the way of doing what they want?
I mean, the idea that a category or a boundary is a bad thing is a really strange idea that seems to have taken off within the queer movement, third wave feminism, trans activism, to the point that even language, words that have meanings and therefore don't mean anything and everything, are somehow bad because they're exclusive.
Yeah.
Like, it's very strange.
Yeah.
And I'm excluded from the category of man, and that doesn't bother me.
Absolutely.
Why do I need to be a man? I'm not a man.
Absolutely.
There's nothing I can do about that. I think that a lot of it, what it is that men want, or some men want, to be able to speak over women. So they want to control the conversation. So the notion that, and, you know, some men don't want to respect women's boundaries. So the notion that, you know, they aren't entitled to enter women's change rooms if they want to and come into transition houses seems to be appalling to these, you know, these men who are now saying that they're women. You know, how dare they not be allowed in? They have no concerns at all about women's feelings or safeties. I mean, that's what's appalling. It's like, you're one man and you're making all of these women feel unsafe and uncomfortable in a space where they're vulnerable, and you don't care.
Yeah.
Like, what does that say about a person that refuses to feel any empathy or sympathy towards other people who are more vulnerable than they are, and, you know, kind of pushes through anyway, and claims that if they aren't allowed entrance into these spaces where women are vulnerable and might not want a man around, that they are the one who is being made to feel unsafe, or excluded, or marginalized.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the unfortunate fact, I suppose, that even the most privileged people somehow manage to warp things to imagine themselves the persecuted ones. You see this in fascism, right? you know, the Nazis believed that the Germans were being persecuted, that the Jews were controlling everything. I mean, I did a video earlier this year on the incels, and again, they believe themselves to be utterly sort of marginalized, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's a sort of it's almost a narcissistic.
Almost,
Yeah,
almost
almost.
narcissistic. Might, or is it extremely narcissistic?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and there are certainly some interesting connections there.
I think there's a lack of empathy. Like I said before, in terms of this new transgender trend and all these men who are speaking over women and silencing us and threatening us and no platforming us and bullying us because we refuse to pretend that they're female. I mean, it is incredibly narcissistic in my opinion because it's like, you know, your feelings don't get to dictate everyone else's opinions and speech and legislation, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, where is the empathy? Where is the concern for how what you're doing, what you're forcing on everybody else is impacting them? I mean, how can you have no concern at all about women and girls in the world? I mean, it's not just about you, good Lord. I mean, this is a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of people. You know, people who identify as trans are a very small percentage of the population. The rest of us are just males and female. I mean, as they are also, but you know, they're trying to kind of control everything, despite the impacts on you know 99% of the world.
Absolutely. Um, but I mean, my experience of men in general, and I say this as a man who tries to understand, not that I necessarily do, but what I've seen is men have absolutely no idea what women go through. They seriously have no idea, and whether that's through consciously ignoring it, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways, fair enough. I mean, men have a different experience in this world than women do. And so, you know, that's why it is important for us to try to understand each other and listen to each other and try to empathize with each other's experiences. Because, yeah, the way that women experience the world is, yeah, completely different in lots of ways than the way men do. So, yeah, I think it makes sense that they would be surprised. But again, I think there's that empathy piece where people should be trying to kind of hear and understand. You know, we go through something different in the world when we're walking around in the world. You know, women fear male violence
Absolutely.
all the time in our homes, on the street, in bars, in washrooms. You know, and men don't have that experience.
No, it's partly that they've going from the sort of standard male experience, if you like, to then considering yourself transgender, and they've flipped it on its head, so that they've decided that women are the oppressed class because they're cisgender, and that they're oppressed, and they have no idea what women have gone through anyway, and they consider themselves the oppressed ones. I don't know if you saw, there was something on Twitter the other day. Somebody said,
I'm not on Twitter.
oh yeah, of course you're not. We'll get onto that in a bit. But somebody said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realise I was being male socialised when I was being called gay and being bullied for liking girl stuff.
Oh, I did see that. That was a while ago. Yeah.
And you know, it didn't even occur to them. They had absolutely no idea that that's what male socialisation is.
Yeah, it's like that you were bullied for being gay, or if people perceived you as gay. I don't know this person, or for appearing feminine or whatever. I mean, you're being bullied in that way because of patriarchy and because of sexism and because of these oppressive gender roles. And yeah, exactly. That's how men are socialized into masculinity, is by, you know, bullying. I mean, in different ways and more subtle ways. I mean, socialization happens in so many different ways we don't even realize and aren't aware of. But part of it for boys is for sure being bullied and, being called things like fag or a girl, which is, the worst insult you can call a man, to kind of force him to start acting masculine and to, not have feelings or not express his emotions and, be tough and be aggressive and even be violent. That's how it works.
I wanted to tie this all in to this kind of the situation, if you like, the broad situation. We've got corporations which are enforcing these kind of quite extreme positions, right? I mean, you've been permanently banned from Twitter for saying that this guy JY, just referring to him as a he, right?
Yeah, for saying, yeah, it's him. And then I had posted, I think, a screenshot that was somebody else's screenshot that they had posted as evidence that, because somebody had discovered his real identity. And so, yeah, they found a screenshot proving that. And I had asked on Twitter, is it true that JY is actually so-and-so? We're not allowed to say his name or he'll sue us all. But yeah, so that's all I did. And, on Twitter, his male name is up there. Like, he still identifies as his male name. He had put a female name in brackets, but, on Yelp, online, his online presence is under this male name. So how is anyone to know that this person is actually a woman? And beyond that, this misgendering thing had not yet been added to Twitter's terms of service when I tweeted that. So I didn't actually break any rules. If it was in their terms of service at that point, no one knew. They had not yet informed their users or the media. The media began covering this change on Friday. So nobody knew until Friday that misgendering or dead naming was in their terms of service. Yet they created this rule and then retrospectively went back to look through my tweets to find if I'd broken this rule. And, it's a trap and it's unfair. And, obviously these people were just trying to find any way at all to take me down, because there's nothing that I've ever posted on Twitter that constitutes hateful conduct, despite the fact that they blocked my account several times over the past week and a half before they finally suspended me. And when I appealed, the reason was hateful conduct. And, I wasn't saying anything hateful. I was just kind of stating facts and asking questions and engaging in normal conversations. So they added this misgendering thing so that they could go back and have an excuse to ban my account.
Absolutely. And I think we've seen something similar with WordPress. His name was removed and replaced with redacted by someone other than the runner of the blog, presumably.
Fourth Wave Now, I think it was on that site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is it all because of this guy JY going around threatening to sue everybody?
It's because of JY and because of Lisa Kret. So Lisa Kret has a contact at Twitter Safety. Lisa Kret is a local self-identified trans woman, and he's involved in some local unions here, and he's been after any feminist in Vancouver who challenges trans ideology, gender identity legislation, and his identity as a woman. And he was partly responsible for having Vancouver Rape Relief, which is a local transition house, Canada's longest standing rape crisis center, here in Vancouver, having them blacklisted at the BC Federation of Labour Convention in 2016. So essentially they passed a motion ordering locals not to fund Vancouver Rape Relief anymore. So he's trying to take them down. The service that helps women escaping male violence. This is his activism, I guess. He also had the ads pulled from Feminist Current. He went and contacted She Knows, our ad network, and claimed that we were, posting hateful content, which we certainly have not. And they just got scared and pulled our ads. He started a smear campaign along with a few other local trans activists here against an anti-poverty activist named Yuli Chan. and had her no platformed from a conference where she was to speak about her work helping seniors, poor seniors in Chinatown here in Vancouver who were losing their housing due to gentrification. So his entire activism has just been to go after, feminist women who are doing work to help other people, in particular to help to stop male violence against women, and to support women who are particularly marginalized. And so he had been having Twitter safety go through my tweets and delete every tweet that had anything to do with him, even if I didn't say his name. And I did it. I deleted every tweet that Twitter asked me to, and they suspended my account anyway. And their reason was just this one tweet. Yeah, it's him, because I'm not sure if they could have justified it in any other way. But now that they have this misgendering thing, this JY obviously is in contact with somebody at Twitter, because anyone who mentions his name on Twitter, their account seems to be locked down or suspended as well. So these couple people have a lot of power over free speech, and we really need to fight back and be quite afraid and disturbed by that.
Absolutely. And it's not just Twitter. We've had similar things going on with Wikipedia. The last sort of
somebody changed my entry over there.
Did they? Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Some misinformation.
Yeah, they recently got rid of the last radical feminist supporting editor,
no.
And so they've been going through everywhere trying to edit as much as possible.
Awful.
And this is sort of a source of information. Wikipedia, for all its faults, is a collective effort of thousands and thousands of people to store information, and now that one group has control of it, and they have control of Twitter, and WordPress, and it's bizarre in a way, because this is all coming from supposed left-wingers, right? And they're calling on these corporations and, in some circumstances, governments to enforce enforce this.
Yeah, there's so-called leftists are supporting a billion-dollar company to curb free speech.
Absolutely.
They're giving power to a multi-billion-dollar company to control who says what in the public square, in public discourse.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And so here's my theory, and I say this too because I want to hear what you think. Because you hear it from the right, and the right wing tend to claim that sort of, the left wing has infiltrated the establishments, they've infiltrated universities, they've infiltrated the corporations. I don't think that's true at all. I think it's the reverse that's happened, essentially. I think the corporations have essentially infiltrated all the left wing organisations. I think the university's been captured by sort of the neoliberal consensus that what they're sort of selling as radical politics, especially in feminism, but also in other areas, is just the most wishy-washy stuff they can get away with. You especially look at the actions of these the big multi-millionaire donors, who are just pouring money into their particular interpretations of sort of left-wing activism. I'm sure you've noticed both there's a huge overlap between the pro-prostitution groups and the pro-trans groups. Come down to using the same slogans, right? Sex work is work, trans women are women. And so my theory is that it is actually sort of this is a wedge, if you like. What they're doing is they're cannibalizing the left, using the easiest target, which is of course the women, because it's easy to turn men against women, and they're just injecting all of these neoliberal ideas via queer theory and so on, all of the individualist stuff, because we've seen, I've literally seen a supposed communist say that it's good if landlords are offering rooms in exchange for sex because it gives people more options, right? And you've probably come across similar stuff. And you think about that argument. It's just a libertarian argument, right? And I know libertarians, and I get on with some libertarians some of the time, but at least they're honest about what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy is one of the things that bugs me the most, is because the left claims to have this class analysis, but they no longer do. They've taken this really neoliberal, individualist, pro-capitalist approach to prostitution, pornography, and, this gender identity stuff. Like, gender identities, it's a very individualist idea that lacks any kind of real class analysis or analysis of systems of power, and also is very much tied to, big pharma and kind of this idea that womanhood is rooted in these really superficial things that can be bought: plastic surgery, clothing, makeup, etc.
Absolutely. I think it is starting to go beyond the area of feminism. I didn't believe this. A few months ago, I was saying in conversation on Twitter, I said, well, they'll have to find some other way to colonise the anti-racist movements, because there's no way that anybody white is going to claim to be black and get away with it, right? That was naive of me. I don't know if you've seen any of this, but we are actually starting to see this. People genuinely finding any excuse to call themselves black to find any...
Yeah, it seems like people really see currency in marginalization, which is strange. Like, it seems like people who have privilege want to claim marginalized status in order to have a voice. So I don't know, it's a really complex thing to think about, because why is that? Why suddenly are people who are white wanting to claim to be black or indigenous, and why are white men claiming to be women and extremely marginalized when they're not? I guess, part of it is probably anger that people who previously have not had voices or who have been marginalized are no longer as marginalized or are gaining voices. And this is going to sound like maybe a weird MRA comment, but I think that men are sort of starting to feel like they aren't able to be part of certain conversations and want in on those conversations.
Like I'm doing now with all this radical feminism.
Oh, I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I like talking to men. I like talking to women. I like talking to anybody. I guess I sort of feel like we need more open dialogue and more conversations in this world, and not this identity politics crap where only some people are allowed to speak and others can't because they don't attach themselves to that identity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I've said before, is there's a lot of sort of tricks going on, these sort of linguistic mental tricks. So the whole idea of I know I've been told this constantly, right? It's listen to the voices of the marginalized, right? Listen to trans women, listen to sex workers, listen to women, listen to black women, right? And I like to think that I have. I can't really say that objectively, but they're ignoring that everyone has their own opinions, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to listen, but everybody gets to speak also. Like this listen to sex workers, listen to trans women mantra, listen to whoever it is. All it is about saying, listen to this specific opinion. It's not even really about the identities, because there's only certain people with certain opinions that you're supposed to listen to, and you listen to those people and they have different opinions, then you fucked it up.
Absolutely.
But it's like and also just listening. I mean, yes, we should listen, but we should also engage and think critically about what people are saying, regardless of who they are, regardless of if they're women, if they're people of color, if they're trans people or sex workers. I mean, everyone gets to participate in the conversation, and we should be trying to listen to everybody and think critically and engaging. There's
Absolutely.
not some people whose voices I think are, more important than others.
Yeah, the idea that there is an opinion which uh, is shared by one group of people, it's all a smokescreen, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not all prostituted women have the same experience and the same opinions. I mean, that's turning people into stereotypes, right? Not all trans identified people agree with trans activism and trans ideology. Not all women share the same opinions, obviously. Not all people of color share the same opinions or politics. I mean, it's so weird to reduce people to stereotypes and turn us into a monolith. I mean, and it's not honest.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt. I
No,
do have to get going soon because I have
yeah,
to do another interview. So
sure.
just
No,
to warn.
no problem. Yeah, I could go on talking all night to pretty,
Of
but
course.
yeah. So yeah. Well, I think no, I can't think of anything else. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we go?
No, that's fine. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think we're good. Yeah, we covered a whole bunch of stuff. And it's getting late for me, so I'm
Okay. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Hopefully we can talk again at some other time. We can work together on some other projects.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely great to talk to you. Thank you to all of our readers, listeners. And it's goodbye from me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on the show. And I also want to suggest to your followers that they go and sign the petition to have my Twitter account reinstated because this is bullshit.
Absolutely, I will put that link in the description below. Um,
Great.
and if you like this, do click on the like button, subscribe, because there should be more of this kind of thing coming up. Thank you very much. Thank you
Thanks.
again, Megan, and
Take care.
and you.
Bye.